Kathleen Turner was once Hollywood's queen of the 1980s, known for her sultry voice and fierce performances in films like Body Heat and Romancing the Stone. But behind her rise to stardom was a battle no one saw coming. Rheumatoid arthritis nearly derailed her career, leaving her unable to walk or even hold a glass. She fought back, defied doctors' predictions, and even made headlines at 46, stripping down nightly as Mrs. Robinson on stage. Have you heard the real story behind Kathleen Turner's incredible resilience? Kathleen Turner stands as one of those rare forces in Hollywood that refuses to fade. The woman who set screens ablaze in the 1980s with her sultry voice and unforgettable performances. Yeah, she's still very much in the game. But don't think for a second that Turner's ride has been easy, or that she's ever been content to just play along with Hollywood's rules. Now at 68, Kathleen Turner has stepped into the shoes of yet another complex character, Dita Beard, in HBO's White House Plumbers. The role has her playing a foul-mouthed lobbyist caught up in the middle of the Watergate scandal, which blew up President Richard Nixon's world back in the early 70s. While the show may dive into the chaotic mess of Watergate, Turner has always been one to stir up some chaos of her own, both on screen and off. Turner's path to becoming a legend wasn't paved in gold, though. From her breakout in Body Heat back in 1981, when she practically hypnotized audiences with a single glance, she became Hollywood's go-to femme fatale overnight. There was something dangerous about her, something no one else had at the time. And sure, that seductive role turned heads, but Turner was never going to let herself be stuck in that box. She was too smart for that and way too angry. Yes, anger. That's something Turner's never shied away from. She didn't have time for the usual Hollywood games or male-dominated nonsense that tried to keep her in check. While others in her position might have quietly accepted being typecast, Turner rebelled. She immediately started choosing roles that would make sure no one could pin her down as just the seductress. From Romancing the Stone to Crimes of Passion to Peggy Sue Got Married, she was always switching it up. One minute she's the adventurous novelist, the next she's playing a sex worker in a seedy thriller, then she's jumping through time as a housewife. Every role had a different edge, but there was a common thread. Turner wasn't afraid to take on the fight. Hollywood, however, wasn't always kind. She had to battle behind the scenes more often than not, and her rage wasn't just reserved for the characters she played. Turner fought to control her own career, even when it could have cost her everything. Kathleen Turner has never been one to stay quiet. When something didn't sit right, she made sure everyone knew. Take The Jewel of the Nile. After the success of Romancing the Stone, a sequel was inevitable. But Turner, she hated the script. It wasn't the adventure she signed up for, it was something else entirely. She fought hard to get out of making it, but the studio wasn't having it. They came down on her with a $25 million lawsuit threat. It wasn't just about the money, though. Michael Douglas, her co-star and the producer, was involved, and the pressure was heavy. Turner didn't buckle under the weight, though. She fought back, eventually finding a compromise with Douglas that allowed her to make the film without losing herself in the process. Even when the odds were stacked against her, she wasn't about to let someone else dictate the terms. But Jewel of the Nile wasn't the only time she pushed back. Director Ken Russell wanted her to do a nude scene for Crimes of Passion, and Turner wasn't having any of it. She was never shy about her body, but she wasn't about to be exploited just for the sake of shock value. No way. She drew her line in the sand and stuck to it. She didn't do the scene, and Russell had to find a way to work around it. Turner wasn't difficult, as some might say. She was decisive. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. That reputation of being difficult stuck, though. In Hollywood, it seemed like being a woman who knew her mind was almost a crime. Turner didn't care. If knowing what she wanted made her hard to work with, then so be it. As she put it, people who actually worked with her never had a bad word to say. She was no pushover, and if that made waves, she was more than fine with that. But Turner's strength didn't just come from years of navigating Hollywood politics. It was something that was embedded in her early, even if her family didn't quite see it the same way. She was born Mary Kathleen Turner in Springfield, Missouri, into a family that wasn't too thrilled about her career choices. Both of her parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, which meant she spent a lot of time living abroad. From Cuba to Venezuela and eventually the UK, Turner grew up moving from place to place, always the outsider. It wasn't the kind of upbringing that led naturally to a life on the stage, and her father wasn't exactly supportive. He thought acting was a path straight to disgrace, equating it with being a streetwalker. Despite the lack of family support, Turner pushed forward. She fell in love with acting while attending the American School in London, and when her father passed away just before she graduated, there was no turning back. She returned to the U.S., studied theater, and eventually made her way to New York in 1977. This was where everything started to click. But it wasn't always easy. One of the first things she realized when she started auditioning for commercials was that her voice made her different, and not in a good way, at least not according to casting directors. They told her she wouldn't find work with a voice like hers. But Kathleen Turner didn't see her raspy, husky tone as a problem. She embraced it. Instead of trying to change it, she leaned in, training her voice to go even deeper. She ran vocal exercises, stretched that muscle lower and lower until her voice became the thing that made her stand out. Turner never looked back. That voice? It's one of the most iconic in Hollywood today. She's never regretted sticking to her guns, and honestly, why would she? It's part of what makes her a true original. But those early days weren't without their strange moments. During one screen test, she was handed a script in New York for a standard audition. When she showed up in LA, the script had morphed into a trashy mud wrestling movie. Turner didn't hesitate. She found a roll of toilet paper, wrapped it around herself, and scribbled Miss Missouri across it. Needless to say, she got out of that audition fast, and with her pride intact. Kathleen Turner was never just going to be another Hollywood star. She came in knowing exactly who she was, and she's never lost sight of it. Kathleen Turner's career was never short on drama, both on and off the screen. And no story captures that better than her electric relationship with Michael Douglas. The two shared an undeniable chemistry, from the minute they first worked together on Romancing the Stone. The film itself was a wild ride, full of Indiana Jones-style action, dangerous stunts, and the kind of adventure that left audiences breathless. But behind the scenes, the heat between Turner and Douglas was real, and it wasn't just the Mexican jungle making things steamy. Turner was single at the time, and Douglas, well, he seemed to be. At least that's what she thought. He and his wife, Deandra Luker, were separated, or so the story went. As the shoot went on, Turner found herself getting closer to Douglas. Maybe it was the long days on set, or maybe it was the flirty banter they shared between takes, but it felt like more than just acting. There was something real there. "I think we might have been falling in love," she'd later admit. But just as things were starting to heat up, reality slapped them both in the face. Deandra suddenly showed up on set, flying down to Mexico in what felt like a territorial move. The message was clear. Michael wasn't as available as it seemed. Turner wasn't the type to cross a line like that. She respected the boundaries. "You don't mess with another woman's husband," she would say. And that was that. Any romantic spark between her and Douglas fizzled out as quickly as it had appeared. Still, that didn't change the electric chemistry they had on screen. Romancing the Stone became a massive hit, and audiences couldn't get enough of the two of them together. It was only natural that the studio rushed into making a sequel, The Jewel of the Nile. The dynamic between Turner and Douglas was just as powerful, but behind the scenes, things were different. Turner was dealing with her frustrations over the script, and any lingering romantic tension between her and Douglas was officially put to rest. Turner had moved on, both in her personal and professional life. She married Jay Weiss, a real estate developer, in 1984, and together they had a daughter, Rachel. Douglas, on the other hand, stayed in his complicated marriage to Deandra for a while longer before eventually divorcing and later marrying Catherine Zeta-Jones in 2000. But that didn't stop Turner and Douglas from working together again. In 1989, they reunited for The War of the Roses, a pitch-black comedy about a couple going through a vicious divorce. The film took their chemistry to a new level, this time as exes who were practically at war with each other. It was dark, it was hilarious, and it solidified them as one of Hollywood's most iconic duos. There was a certain magic when they shared the screen, but Turner was clear on one thing. Despite the sparks, a real-life relationship between them would never have worked. Douglas was, in her words, old-fashioned. He was competitive too, and Turner believed that if they had ever been a couple, he would have seen her as competition. That wasn't something she was willing to deal with. Turner knew her worth, and she wasn't about to play second fiddle to anyone, least of all a man. "I had no intention of being second to anybody," she admitted. The truth was, while their flirtation might have been fun, a romance between them would have been a disaster. Turner was fiercely independent, and Douglas, coming from a family of all men, had his own ideas about how relationships should work. It wouldn't have ended well. Even after all those years, the bond between Turner and Douglas remained strong. They were never romantically involved, but they were great friends. Their last collaboration was on The Kominsky Method, a Netflix comedy series where Turner played the ex-wife of Douglas's character. In a way, it was a nod to their real-life dynamic. Two people who had incredible chemistry but knew they were better off as friends. Turner joked that playing Douglas's ex was easy because, in some ways, it felt like they'd lived through it already. It's funny to think that, for all the heat between them, the closest Turner and Douglas ever came to being a couple was on screen. She often gave credit to Zeta Jones for handling her marriage to Douglas with grace, even with everyone constantly talking about the great chemistry Turner and Douglas once had. In the end, it all worked out the way it was supposed to. Turner didn't need a romance with Douglas to have one of the most memorable partnerships in Hollywood history. Still, the tension, the almost romance, the undeniable spark, it all added to the mystique of Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. They were never destined to be a couple, but the legend of their connection will always keep fans wondering, what if? Kathleen Turner was riding high through the 80s, moving from one hit to another. She was having a ball, as she once put it. But the truth? Life was about to throw her a curveball that even the toughest Hollywood star couldn't see coming. It all hit in the early 90s. Turner was filming Serial Mom, playing a cheerful psychopath, when she started noticing something wasn't right. Her feet swelled up so badly she couldn't even fit into her shoes. What started as a minor annoyance quickly spiraled into something far more serious. Before long, she was in constant pain. Walking became a challenge. Simple things like holding a glass or climbing stairs turned into impossible tasks. The diagnosis was brutal: rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic autoimmune disease that attacked her joints, leaving her in agony. For Turner, who had spent her career taking on physically demanding roles, it was a nightmare. She could no longer stand, sit, or even lie down without pain. It wasn't the kind of disease that kills you, but it destroys your life. The actress who had once stormed through Hollywood now found herself crawling up the stairs on her hands and knees. Her strength, both physical and mental, was under attack. The illness forced Turner to slow down, to step away from the roles she loved. Leading parts were no longer possible. But if you thought that would break her, you'd be wrong. "I'm a very stubborn woman," she'd say, a hint of that old fire still burning in her. She wasn't about to let rheumatoid arthritis dictate the rest of her life. Doctors told her she'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of her days. That was 30 years ago. Turner proved them all wrong. But it wasn't just the disease that took its toll. The treatment, which involved heavy doses of steroids and pain medication, changed her appearance. Turner gained weight and the media was ruthless. Tabloids weren't interested in her illness. They preferred to spread rumors that she had a drinking problem. It was a complete betrayal, she later admitted, but she kept the truth to herself. She believed that if Hollywood knew she was suffering from a chronic illness, her career would be over. So she let the gossip swirl. Better to let them think whatever the hell they wanted, she thought. But it hurt, deeply. And while the rumors weren't true at first, alcohol eventually became a real issue. Turner turned to vodka to help ease the pain, thinking it was a better alternative than popping pills. Painkillers were addictive and dangerous, she thought, but another drink? That seemed fine. It wasn't. Slowly, alcohol started to creep into her daily routine. It didn't interfere with her work, but at home it began taking over. She found herself drinking to dull not just the physical pain, but the emotional toll of what her life had become. One day, it all hit her. She realized she was wasting precious moments with her family, her daughter, Rachel, and her husband, Jay. She was closing herself off from the people she loved most. That clarity led her to check into rehab in 2002. It was there she met people from all walks of life, former doctors and nurses who had destroyed their careers, even lives, because of their addictions. Turner saw herself reflected in them and had a sobering realization. She didn't think of herself as an alcoholic, but she knew she was abusing alcohol to cope. After rehab, she stopped drinking for a couple of years, resetting her life and finding a better balance. Today, Turner's relationship with alcohol is different. She'll enjoy a cocktail when the mood strikes, but knows where her limits are. It helps that the pain she once felt every day is now much more manageable. Her rheumatoid arthritis is in remission, although she still has flare-ups from time to time, but she's no longer defined by the disease. It took something from her, but it didn't take everything. Despite the illness, Turner kept working. She found a home on the stage, taking on roles that Hollywood wasn't offering older women. At 46, she made headlines by playing Mrs. Robinson in a West End production of The Graduate, stripping down every night on stage. It was a daring move, but Turner was never one to shy away from a challenge. And when she wasn't working, she was creating. She even developed her own one-woman cabaret show, Finding My Voice, which became another outlet for her undeniable talent. Turner didn't stop there. She moved from film to television, finding success in shows like Friends, where she played Chandler's parent Charles in one of the most memorable guest appearances on the show. At the time, the character wasn't recognized as transgender, something that would be viewed very differently today. If offered the role now, she admits she'd probably pass, but she has no regrets. It was a different time, and for Turner, it was all about embracing the challenge of playing something new. As the years have passed, Turner has remained as sharp and driven as ever. She teaches acting at various universities and holds poker nights with her friends, enjoying the company and the bourbon. When asked about aging, she doesn't flinch. Sure, turning 60 rattled her, but now, as she approaches 70, she's taking inspiration from the likes of Maggie Smith, who's still doing some of her best work well into her 80s. Kathleen Turner may have faced her share of hardships, but she's still standing. She's a survivor, not just of Hollywood, but of life itself. The fire that once fueled her rage now burns with a quiet confidence. She's come a long way from the sultry star who dominated the screen in body heat, but that same intensity, that same spirit is still there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, and turn on those notifications. You won't want to miss what we're diving into next.